Tonight at 10 in Tokyo, the sporting drama that is the Olympics is over as Team GB celebrates one of its best ever games.
And we're watching British Olympic history as Jason Kenny takes the title.
It's his 7th gold medal in 4 Olympics, making Jason Kenny Britain's most decorated Olympian.
I felt like I was standing still around that last corner. I was hacking away. But I just kept telling myself, you know, it's a medal, even if one comes, it's still a medal. And then when I crossed the line, I was like, oh, it's a bloody gold medal.
The closing ceremony was spectacular, but played out to an empty stadium, testament to the age of COVID.
After a Games like no other, one that defied expectations, I'll be live here in Tokyo as it starts preparations for the Paralympics in just 2 weeks' time.
And we'll be assessing what the Games have meant to the people of Japan. Also tonight, in Greece, a scene from hell as wildfires burn out of control. Residents and holidaymakers try to escape.
It's like a scene of an apocalyptic movie, definitely, because there is no sky, the sun is red, has been red the entire day, so it's quite scary.
And as some COVID travel restrictions ease, no quarantine for those fully vaccinated from France. Good evening. It was 2 weeks of intense sporting drama taking place in some of the most difficult circumstances for any Summer Olympics in modern times. The Games in Tokyo are now over, delayed by a year because of the coronavirus pandemic. And despite empty stadiums, the mass testing of athletes and the initial apathy of some in Japan, for many the Games have been a success. The closing ceremony was held behind closed doors and capped one of the best games ever for Team GB, winning 65 medals, matching London 2012. Today, Jason Kenny took gold in the velodrome, making him Britain's most successful ever Olympian. And Lauren Price from Wales won in middleweight boxing. With more, here's Natalie Perks with our first report tonight from Tokyo.
Jason Kenny is Britain's most successful Olympian of all time.
And how. The man with the most medals and the most golds did it with the most accomplished performance of his career.
What a lineup for this Olympic final.
He'd certainly saved the best till last. Performances in qualifying had been less than explosive, but wait, something extraordinary was about to happen.
Jason Kenny makes a move early here.
Sensing an opportunity, Kenny put the hammer down and left his rivals eating dust.
And we're watching British Olympic history as Jason Kenny takes the title.
His teammates enjoyed that one. The most understated of champions had delivered gold across 4 Olympic Games, a triumph of endurance.
It's funny, when you look back on the ones you've already got, it seems really easy. And then when you try and get more, it just seems unbelievable. You remember how hard it was. But I just kept telling myself, you know, it's a medal, even if one comes, it's still a medal. And then when I crossed the line, I was like, oh, it's a bloody gold medal.
But it's not just Jason Kenny making waves here. There have been some spectacular Olympic debuts, some remarkable personal achievements and many records broken. But this is it, the final medal of the Tokyo Games for Team GB. But what colour will it be for Lauren Price?
Well, there is Lauren Price making her familiar march towards the boxing ring.
The life of this champion from the valleys is a script straight from Hollywood. Raised by her grandparents, 52 football caps for Wales and multiple kickboxing world titles. Along the way, she worked night shifts as a taxi driver to support her boxing training. Today, Li Qian of China, the Rio bronze medalist, was the passenger in this fight.
Here's confirmation, Lauren Price.
And in her moment of glory, a glance to the heavens for her late grandfather.
It's a dream come true. Yeah, I still can't believe it. I got to pinch myself. But it just goes to show years of hard work. If you dream and you work hard enough, you can achieve anything.
This was British boxing's most successful Olympics since 1920. But as the sun set on the Tokyo Games, one man's audacious victory left him head and shoulders above the rest. Natalie Perks, BBC News, Tokyo.
And the final medals table shows Britain finishing 4th with 65, 22 golds, 21 silvers and 22 bronze. Tokyo has now handed over the Olympic flag to the Mayor of Paris, setting the stage for the next Games in France in 2024. During the closing ceremony, the organisers declared the Games had given hope and unity to the world in the midst of the pandemic. So how will the Tokyo Games be remembered? Here's our sports editor, Dan Rowan.
The end of a Games like no other. As with the rest of Tokyo's Olympics, its closing ceremony was behind closed doors. The athletes with the stadium largely to themselves. Laura Kenny, Britain's greatest female Olympian, with the honour of carrying the flag. But rather than sadness at what was missing, a sense of pride at the spirit that had prevailed.
For the first time since the pandemic began, the entire world came together. Billions of people around the globe were united by emotion. This gives us faith in the future. The Olympic Games Tokyo 2020 are the Olympic Games of hope, solidarity and peace.
From world records...
Smash the old world record!
...and new sports...
That was incredible.
...to shocks...
Italy take the gold!
...and great sportsmanship.
Oh, they've given it to them both.
Tokyo 2020 will be seen by many as a classic, despite unprecedented challenges faced by both organisers and athletes.
I think it's just been the most probably challenging Games, but at the same time the most giving, because if you've got here and you've achieved what you wanted after everything that we've been through, it just makes these medals just that bit more special.
Britain's 65 medals equals their haul as hosts at London 2012. This their second most successful overseas Games after Rio. Rowing, a traditional strength, disappointed, but in other sports Team GB excelled, including the new mixed events. Glory shared by both familiar faces and new stars.
Oh, yes!
I think it's up there with one of the great achievements of recent Games. 70% of the squad here today are expected to medal in Paris, not in Tokyo. They had the coronavirus to deal with, a lack of proper competitive build-up that builds that experience into the team. So to have performed as they have done is a remarkable testimony to all those athletes.
Athlete welfare was a recurring theme, raised not only by superstar Simone Biles, but also the extreme heat competitors faced. The case of Belarus sprinter Kristina Timanovskaya, after she refused her team's orders to fly home, was another controversy the Games will be remembered for.
The sense here in Tokyo is that these athletes ultimately came to the rescue of these Games. The judgment and the motives behind pressing on with these Olympics will always be debated, but for many, the fact that we're here at the closing ceremony after so many magic moments represents a triumph of sports resilience and defiance.
Like so much here, tonight's ceremony still managed to impress. Surely the next host, Paris, won't face such challenges. Defined and delayed by the pandemic, the Olympics were finally over, but the moments they provided will live on. Dan Rowan, BBC News, Tokyo.
The Games are being hailed by the International Olympic Committee and the Japanese government as a huge success, especially given the pandemic. But for the Japanese people, that success has been overshadowed by a renewed surge in COVID infections, which have reached record levels in Tokyo in recent days. From there, our correspondent Rupert Wingfield-Hayes reflects on what the Games have meant to the people of Japan.
If you tried to get to the Olympic Stadium tonight, this is what you were met with. Hundreds of police blocking alleyways, ordering people to move along. Even the closing fireworks lasted just 15 seconds. But if the authorities were trying to prevent the large gatherings that took place during the opening ceremony, then they failed. Out at the park, the sport-loving Uno family have spent much of the last 2 weeks glued to the telly. But even for them, watching the Games on TV hasn't been an unmitigated joy.
I really wanted to go and watch. It's totally different to watch on TV and actually being there to watch the Games.
It's almost like the Olympics was taking place in another country. We can only watch it on TV. We felt the distance very much.
The last 2 weeks have really been a tale of two cities, two Tokyos. There's the one behind this fence,
where there's been this amazing sport and tremendous success for Japan. And then there's the Tokyo outside the fence, where most of the time you wouldn't even have noticed that the Olympics has been going on. And the same contrast is true for the pandemic. Inside the fence, daily testing means things have been kept pretty well under control. But outside, the pandemic is now out of control.
Critics say the Olympics has sucked away resources, leaving the city without enough COVID testing kits or vaccines.
It has left a scar on the Japanese society, meaning people are divided. And above all, the games left health and economic debt. If you look at numbers in Tokyo, it's just exponentially increasing.
There's no doubt Japan's record-breaking haul of medals has brought real joy to the host nation. But as the Olympic roadshow leaves town, the Olympic host city is being left facing a medical crisis. Rupert Wingfield-Hayes, BBC News in Tokyo.
Well, let's once again join our sports editor Dan Rowan in Tokyo for some final thoughts. Dan, just give us your assessment of the performance of Team GB and of the Games as a whole.
Clive, there's no doubt that being involved in these Olympics on the ground here in Tokyo was at times a surreal and strange experience, as well as an uplifting one. But these Olympics also exceeded many people's expectations. Consider the fact that up until a few weeks before they began, many expected them to have to still be cancelled. And even when it became clear that they would go ahead as planned, many thought that it would be a soulless experience made purely for television, and that it would be badly affected if there was an outbreak in the athletes' village. The fact that Tokyo is waking up this morning with those fears proving unfounded, I think will be a huge source of relief to the IOC, who of course pressed on largely to protect the broadcast billions on which their finances depend. And there'll be a real sense of gratitude from the Olympic movement and indeed from the athletes towards the hosts that they refuse to buckle. For Team GP, I think these games will be seen as nothing short of a triumph, and it will be very interesting to see now whether or not UK sport can persuade the government to give them more financial support as a result of this success, and whether or not the emergence of new stars in new sports that are more accessible, of course, and with these new mixed gender formats really capturing the imagination, that translates this time into more community and school sport. It is desperately needed, of course, because participation has taken a hit as a result of the pandemic. That will be interesting to see. As for Tokyo, well, they have now just over 2 weeks to prepare for the Paralympics after a Games that really, I think, will stand for a spirit of determination and resolve.
OK, Dan Rowan. Thank you for that, Dan. Live in Tokyo. Hundreds more people have been forced to leave their homes in parts of Greece as wildfires continue to burn out of control. This summer, scorching temperatures have blighted much of southern Europe, leaving woodland tinder dry and susceptible to fire. Greece itself is experiencing its worst heat wave in 30 years. The region north of Athens and the island of Evia, the country's largest island, are among the worst hit areas from where ferries are helping evacuate residents and holidaymakers. Our Europe correspondent Bethany Bell has sent us this report from Evia.
Exodus from Evia. There are long queues at the port. People are waiting to get on ferries to the mainland. Holidaymakers and some locals are leaving after villages in parts of the north of the island were evacuated.
Bye.
Chris, who works on Evia as a singer, says the wildfires are spreading and the authorities aren't doing enough.
The most people see that we don't have any help until yesterday, and they could save everybody. And it wasn't true. The people don't know where to go.
Hello and welcome
the
to
big problem
ITV
is
News
that,
Meridian.
tonight's headlines we
in the
feel that they let us burn.
This is what they're fleeing from. Wildfires have been blazing out of control for almost a week now. Houses and forests have been destroyed.
Bye-bye.
This village is being evacuated. As thick orange smoke fills the air, people wait nervously for the ferry to depart.
It's like a scene of an apocalyptic movie, definitely, because there is no sky, the sun is red. It's quite scary.
It's time to leave. The fires are getting closer and closer to this village. Just a few miles from here, there are bright blue skies, but here the air is full of smoke and ash, and it's making it harder for people to breathe. No one knows if this village will be spared. It's now up to the gods of the winds and the weather. Bethany Bell, BBC News, Avia.
The world is getting dangerously close to running out of time to avert catastrophic climate change. That's the warning from Alok Sharma, the minister in charge of November's climate change conference in Glasgow. It comes as the UN is set to publish a landmark report on the science of climate change tomorrow. Well, our science editor, David Shukman, is here with me. This announcement tomorrow, a pretty big moment in the science of climate change itself.
That's right. I think of all the reports this UN climate panel has produced over the last 30 years, the one tomorrow will pack the biggest punch. I suspect that its warnings about the dangers of rising temperatures will be the starkest we've seen, and its language on the fact that it's human activity driving all this will be the most robust. And I think the reason for that is that the scientists now have a far better understanding than they used to about how the planet works. They've got fleets of satellites, they've got supercomputers, a far better ability to work out what's going to happen if we keep adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere. And I think a major element of the report that we'll see tomorrow morning at 9 o'clock London time will be about extremes of weather, exactly the kind of thing that Bethany was reporting on from the Greek islands. Because scientists have always said that if you keep adding greenhouse gases to the atmosphere, you create more violent conditions, more heat waves, more droughts, more extremes of rainfall. And I think, of course, the timing of all of this, I mean, you've just mentioned the Glasgow summit in November. I mean, this landmark report will land on the desks of governments, and in the negotiations towards the end of the year, if you get a government, maybe a major fossil fuel economy, it sort of raises a question about, well, is this climate change thing serious? Do we really need to respond to it? People will be able to point to this report and say, yes, it's serious, and the sooner we act, the better.
Yeah, OK. David, many thanks. David Shukman there. The Taliban has captured 3 more provincial capitals, this time in northern Afghanistan, as they intensify their offensive to seize power following the withdrawal of Western troops. But the government in Kabul insists its forces are fighting back to retake lost ground. Here's our diplomatic correspondent, Paul Adams.
Fire and confusion in the centre of Kunduz. Taliban pictures appear to show yet another city falling under their control. This is their biggest prize so far, a large city, economically and strategically important, and it seems to have fallen easily. Afraid of the fighting as much as the Taliban, civilians are fleeing, some of them heading south for Kabul. A government spokesman says the Taliban will soon be ousted, but similar claims have been made elsewhere, apparently without result. To the west, Taliban fighters inspect newly captured government buildings in Saripol, another provincial capital, one of 3 reportedly captured in just one day. The Taliban have now captured 5 provincial centres. As well as Saripol and Kunduz, they now appear to control Zaranj, Sheberghan and Talakan. No longer content to control the countryside, but confident enough to move on major cities.
If the Taliban could make it to Kunduz, maybe they could make it to Kabul, and that in itself is a big fear. The only good option would be if there's some kind of a political settlement, but that doesn't seem any more possible today than it did 2 or 3 years ago.
And tens of thousands of Afghans are being displaced. This is not just a political and military disaster. Decades of conflict in Afghanistan have created whole generations of refugees. The West's military withdrawal is almost complete. Afghans fear they're being abandoned. The government can request American airstrikes, but for how long and to what effect? Paul Adams, BBC News.
Here, the latest government coronavirus figures show there were more than 27,000 new infections recorded in the latest 24-hour period, which means on average there were 27,288 new cases per day in the last week. 39 deaths were recorded in the last 24 hours. That's an average of 86 a day in the last 7 days. Nearly 89% of adults in the UK have now had their first jab and 74.5% are fully vaccinated. The latest changes to the UK's COVID travel restrictions have come into force. Mexico is now on the red list, with arrivals to Britain having to stay in government-approved hotels for 10 days isolation at their own expense. 7 countries, including Germany, have been added to the green list, and there are now no restrictions for travellers who've been double jabbed arriving from France. Here's our business correspondent, Katie Austin.
Just off the Eurostar from Paris to London, and for passengers who've had both jabs, there's now no need to isolate.
We were expecting to quarantine, so with having the kids, it's a very nice surprise that we don't have to. It's the first time they've seen their grandparents in France for the last 18 months.
We were able to go back today and not have to quarantine. That's pretty great, yeah.
Yeah, it makes a huge difference. It definitely enables us to travel a little bit more, yeah.
Desperate for any boost after the crippling effect of more than a year of restrictions, travel and tourism businesses are hoping for a flurry of last-minute holiday bookings. This campsite in the west of France used to fill up with British visitors. It's still very quiet, but the owners say Wednesday's announcement has helped.
We're starting to pick up a lot more bookings. There just seems to be a general feeling of a bit more confidence.
And relief that they can actually come out.
Brittany Ferries has seen a surge in reservations, but still only hopes to carry 500,000 passengers this year, less than a quarter of pre-pandemic levels.
Season 21 will be worse than the season 20 for Brittany Ferries, so I guess it's more than welcome, this announcement. It's good news, but it comes in a year where at the end of the day, for us, everything is about 22 and making 22 a real normal year.
The changes which have come in today are subject to a review in 3 weeks. The Transport Secretary has argued this provides some certainty for passengers. There are concerns, though, in the travel industry that COVID testing requirements are still putting people off, and some businesses think it's too late to save their summer. Katie Austin, BBC News.
The first cricket test between England and India has been abandoned as a draw. Rain stopped any play on the final day at Trent Bridge. The second test begins at Lord's on Thursday. The Argentine football star Lionel Messi has made a tearful goodbye to Barcelona, the club he joined at the age of 13. He says he did everything he could to stay and blamed the Spanish league's spending rules for scuppering a new contract. The 34-year-old won 34 trophies with the Catalan club and says a move to Paris Saint-Germain is a possibility. Now, in a moment here on BBC One, it'll be time for the news where you are, but we'll leave you now with some memorable moments from the Tokyo Olympics. Have a very good evening.
There'll be no spectators at the Olympic Games in Tokyo.
Here we are right outside. Tens of thousands of people gather to try and glimpse a bit of the action. Oh no! The biggest upset we've ever seen in women's cycling. Wow, there it is.
Johnson, it all comes crashing down.
Let me go out there, at least try. I was so upset that I didn't win the gold.
The way we've attacked this project has been really exceptional.
Simone Biles is back. Gold medal winning athletes, how does that sound?
And it's all right, yeah.